Hi, I'm Kaisa. I'm going to talk about our LARP, Seaside Prison. It is a black box LARP about the situation in Gaza. It's aimed at a somewhat wider audience than most LARPs, and one of the aims in this project was to make a LARP that would be approachable for people who have never LARPed before. It was supposed to premiere this week at Tampere as part of the Tampere LARP Festival on Tuesday. However, it got cancelled like so many other things, so unfortunately I'm not talking about a LARP that I have run, where I could tell you what worked and what didn't work and so on. Instead, I'm talking about a future project. I'm hoping to see how this LARP actually will be in first week of July when we're going to run it at Helsinki at Theatre Universum. This is a LARP that runs in a theater environment, which I think is important for some of the people who come from outside the LARP scene. There's like a familiar environment where this event happens. So the idea is to have some kind of package that you can take part that only takes like one evening. So this LARP lasts from 4 to 5 hours, depending on a little bit depending on the group of participants. And you don't need to prepare in advance. You just buy a ticket and then you come. A little bit like if you were coming to theater or movies or whatever. And that way we think it will be more approachable for wider audiences. It is a Palestinian, Finnish, Norwegian LARP. The LARP design team, there are like me, and then there's Mohammad Rabah from Palestine and Martin Nielsen from Norway. And then there are lots of other people in the team as well. We have professional sound design, light design, and video projection design. So our sound designer is Hannu Niemi. Our light designer is Essi Santala, who has actually done professional light design for theater. And our projection designer is Joona Pettersson, who has also done video projection design for theater professionally. So I want to say something about the background of this, like why you want to make or why I want to make a LARP for a wider cultural audience. I think like recently this kind of participatory experiences have become more and more popular. There's like participatory theater, lots of stuff like this, and also like experience design has become more important. I've been to several events where, for example, people from performance arts, from this participatory performance arts, and people from LARP meet, such as the Playdate events. And there are actually, I've met quite many people who ask like, how could I try out this LARP? Like, where could I get started? And the same thing when I talk about LARP to other people, just random people that I meet, they're interested in trying it out. However, at the moment, at least in Finland, it's quite hard to get in a LARP. You have to like sign up, and not all the people who sign up typically get into the LARP. There's more demand than supply. There are lots of, like, quite often if you go to a LARP, it's like you have to travel somewhere, you have to spend a weekend somewhere, you have to pay a lot, you have to make your own costume, you have to read lots of material, you have to come up with relationships for your character. To put it short, you have to prepare a lot. And this can feel a bit daunting or scary for people who don't have any LARP experience. It's like you would like to try out this new thing, and then you're like, okay, so now I have to do all these things. So the idea with Seaside Prison was to make a LARP that would be easy to approach for people who don't have any experience in LARP. So it's only like one evening. It's in this tradition of blackbox LARPs where you just come to the site. There's a workshop that gets you sort of prepared for the LARP. You don't have to do anything beforehand, and then you experience the experience and then you go home. So you can kind of buy a ticket a little bit like you would buy a ticket for a theater play, and then you experience it and you go home. Okay, so I had this idea of making a LARP for a wider cultural audience, but I also had the idea of making a LARP about Gaza. Somehow the idea came naturally because we have already made the Palestinian Finnish LARP Halat Hisar, which is a LARP set in an occupied Finland. So the idea is that we have transferred the real world political situation of Palestine to Finland. So the players play Finns who live under occupation, but they still play in their own cultural context. So this whole area of Finland has been occupied by a fictional entity, and then the reality mirrors that of Palestine. And in this world of Halat Hisar, this fictional world, there are these Åland Islands, which are islands somewhere between Finland and Sweden. And they are somehow the Halat Hisar world's counterpart for Gaza. So there's a Gaza-like environment there. And I was thinking that because somehow Halat Hisar, there we have lots of fiction and sort of transmitting the idea of this political situation. It requires lots of background work. You somehow have to make your players grasp a lot of information. But I thought that in the case of Gaza, you could maybe somehow distill the essential things into something that is much easier to grasp, something where you don't need that much of background knowledge. So Gaza is this small land area somewhere between Israel and Egypt. There are 1.8 million people living there. It's very small. It's about, like, the land area is about the same area as the land area of the city of Espoo in Finland. So it's really just like a city size area. It's under siege by Israel, which means that you cannot get out of Gaza. It's really hard to get into Gaza as well. It's really hard to, like, they restrict really a lot what kind of goods go into Gaza. So there's shortage of pretty much everything. I've talked to people who have lived in Gaza who have that experience, and they talked a lot about the goods that they can't access. For example, there's often a shortage of female hygiene products like menstrual pads, tampons, so on. And for example, construction materials are not let in, so it's hard to, for example, build a house. Israel bombs Gaza every now and then. There are like small bombings almost every week. Sometimes there are larger attacks. I think there's about 6 years since the last one when Israel massively bombed Gaza. So I think right now we're all worried about the coronavirus in our own countries. We're worried whether it will overburden our healthcare systems, whether there will be enough of intensive care units, enough of ventilator machines for all the patients, and so on. Now, just think about the situation in Gaza, where the healthcare is already overburdened. So they have a population of 1.8 million people. They have the capacity to do 200 corona tests for 1.8 million people. The first cases of corona have been now confirmed in Gaza. There are 12 confirmed cases who are now in quarantine. So it has spread to Gaza more slowly than to other places. Here it has been for the advance of Gazans that it has been isolated from the rest of the world. However, it's a complete disaster if it starts spreading. In Seaside Prison, the players play these two families who live as neighbors by the sea on Åland Islands. And they play several days and nights out of the life of the families. And during some of the nights there are bombings, and then it's randomly decided on which house the bomb lands and which room is destroyed, and then the characters who are in that room die. So the idea is that you have these families, you have your everyday life, you have your social dynamics, and then you sort of look at how the fact that some random people die affects it. One of the ideas both in Halat-Hisar and in Seaside Prison is that you don't play Palestine or Palestinians. We're trying to sort of avoid issues like issues of appropriation or issues of not feeling secure playing a different culture, and shifting and because we want to focus on the situation, the reality and the politics, in case of Seaside Prison, into everyday life. And that's why Halat-Hisar was set in Finland and Seaside Prison is set on Åland Islands, also in Finland. And maybe if one day we are lucky enough to run it in another country, then we will set it in some setting in that country. We want to contextualize the experience, so we want our players to know what the connections are to Gaza. So what we do in the debrief for contextualization of the LARP, we show some or at least our plan right now is to show some very short video clips where people from Gaza talk about their real life experience, and then the longer videos will be available online, and the players can later, when they feel like it, go there and watch them. Another thing that we plan to do, or we planned for the Tampere run, to have somebody who is from Gaza and who was quite recently living there but who now is in Germany, to play the LARP together with the players, and then after the LARP discuss with them about the connection points and differences between the LARP world and the real world Gaza. So basically the players will have the chance to ask questions from somebody who is actually from Gaza, and that's our plan also in the later runs of this LARP. Okay, and then finally I will talk a little bit about the scenography. So we try to build the atmosphere using light and sound and video. We have this video projection of the sea. Then we have the lights, and they change depending of the time of the day. So we have daytime lighting, and we have afternoon and evening lights. And then about the bombings, we did the bombings with sounds and lights. So Essi, our light designer, who is actually working professionally in theater, she had this idea of using a very bright light for the bombings. And here you can see also a video also by Katri Lassila from the test run.
For all your days, I pray thee, Lord, to guide my ways.
Is this the new house? This is the military. You have 5 minutes to leave the house before it will be bombed. That night, the city was bombed, and the families living in the two houses lost some of their loved ones. The dead were buried. Eventually, a ceasefire was reached. Days passed, life returned to normal, and people went about their daily routines, missing those they had lost.
In any case, we have in this LARP 2 families. Each family has from 4 to 8 family members, so it's LARP for from 8 to 16 players. And then there are different character groups inside the families, and in the workshop we decide like who is going to play what. But for example, there are these elders who are people, they're like old people who still remember the better times. They're like the old generation of the family, and they're also the people who have the last word in the family. There are like at most 2 elders in each family, and the players can decide whether the elders are a couple or whether they are siblings. And then the rest of the characters in the family, they're either the children of the elders or their spouses. One question when you're making a LARP for a wider cultural audience is that you actually want that audience to come to your LARP. So you have to advertise it also outside the usual LARP channels. As I said before, we did a test run, and I was really happy for the turnout about how many people without previous LARP or role-playing experience came to the test run. So what we are doing for reaching those people, well, one of the things we do, or one of the advantages that we have, is that we're running our LARP at the theater that we have rented, and then they will put an advertisement of it on their page, so all the people who check out what's going on in this theater, well, they might think like, okay, let's try this. Also, we're planning to have an invited run for, like, we're going to invite journalists, we're going to invite some people who work in the theater sphere, we are going to invite some people who work with the Palestine issue, some other people who might be interested, some of our funders, and so on. We're also planning to send press releases to major papers beforehand, like so that maybe on the upcoming events page or something. There's already been some interest from the media. I'm hoping that at some point we will be able to run the LARP, that there will be many people who come from outside the LARP scene, from different cultural audiences. We hope to run this in July or maybe later if the corona situation is still bad. But we're hoping that you will then take part. Thank you.